Hello everyone and welcome. In this video we're going to be checking out the 2016 Chevy Volt, so the next generation Chevy Volt. And rather than do my usual review, I thought I'd do something a little bit different, because on the little sheet that they give me with the information about the car, it says it has 53 miles of electric only range. And it just so happens that the fuel economy course that I take all of my vehicles on is about 50 to 53 miles, somewhere in that range. And so I thought, let's see if this vehicle can do it without the engine ever kicking on. So that's what we're going to do. So to turn on the vehicle, you've got a blue button to start it up, and then should come on here shortly. Interesting, there's a bit of a delay of that screen coming on. Now it says here that we have 43 miles of electric range, and you may be wondering, okay, if I'm in some empty parking lot, how do I know that that battery is fully charged? Well, the car comes with a mode called hold, and so I drove here in that hold mode, and what that hold mode does is it keeps your engine on so that you don't use any of your electric charge. So I drove here in that hold mode when I left my house with that battery at full, so it had been charging in my garage for 24 hours, and now we're going to go see if it can make it. Now, they don't seem too confident in that 53 mile statement because it's fully charged and it says 43 miles. But you know, some people are going to drive more or less aggressively, and you know, different driving conditions. So most of the vehicles which I've driven on this fuel economy course, I can do better than their highway rating. So I expect that with this vehicle, I'd be able to at least get those 53 miles without the engine kicking on. Now I've got a display here which shows me where the energy is coming from. So I've got my battery and it shows the engine, and if the engine ever kicks on, this display will show it. So under the hood, there's two drive motors, and there is an internal combustion engine, a 1.5 liter four-cylinder engine, produces about 100 horsepower, and that the dual electric motors produce about 150 horsepower. So this is really an electric car with a generator on board so that you can extend the range. So 53 miles of electric range, and then they claim total combined range is about 420 miles. I've got the cruise control set at 60, which is the speed limit. On my fuel economy test course, what I usually do is I don't exceed the speed limit by any more than 5 miles per hour. So here we're just going to float along at the speed limit and see how it does. Now it's already gone down to 42 miles, and I don't think I've quite gone a mile. I did reset the trip computer a little late, so I've got to add a little bit to that, but I can go back in the video and figure out what that was. Now as far as the interior, it is decently quiet in here, and of course you don't hear the engine at all, so you've got a quietness just from the fact that this is an electric vehicle. Visibility out the front and to the sides is pretty good. Looking out the rear isn't too bad. There's a decent blind spot back there to the sides, but aside from that, overall visibility is pretty good. I've got plenty of room for my legs in here, and these seats are actually really comfortable, and they've got some nice bolstering as well. So I do like the seats. Now, along with that drive mode hold, there's three other drive modes. So there's sport, there's normal, and then there is one more. Oh, there's mountain. So in sport and normal, it's going to try and use up all the electric battery before switching over to the engine. Sport's just going to give you a little bit more aggressive acceleration, and you might lose a little bit of efficiency. In mountain mode, if you start, let's say, climbing a hill, what it's going to do is kick on the engine so you save some of that battery power, and then when you go down, you can charge up the battery. If you start going down a hill, the engine can shut off. But basically it kicks the engine on to help provide power to the electric motors if you are going up a hill, so it's not all coming from the battery. So driving on the highway, you actually don't hear much noise. I've got the cruise control set at 65, a little bit of wind noise, a little bit of tire noise, but overall it's decently quiet in here. And one of the cool things that you have is this paddle on the left side of the steering wheel, which you can use to decelerate, and it only uses regen, so you can store a lot of that energy. And it actually gives some pretty decently aggressive braking when you do it, and all of that energy is going to be restored back into that battery. Of course, not all of that energy, but it's going to do only use the regen instead of using the disc brakes. So we're coming up on the most challenging portion of this fuel economy test course, and this is going to be a fairly long grade going uphill, so 10% uphill grade for the next mile and a half. Now keep in mind that this fuel economy course is a loop, so I end in the exact same spot, so a net elevation gain of 0. So we will come back down this hill and be able to regenerate the entire way coming down. So far we have gone about 9 miles, and we've used about 9 miles of range, so it's been matching up, and so far it doesn't look like it's going to be able to get those 53 miles of pure electric range. So as far as the idea of this vehicle, I actually really like it, because 50 miles of electric range and then having an onboard generator means, most of the time that engine's never going to be on, because most people in a day won't be driving 50 miles, or you can get to your destination, charge, and then come back. And so you won't have to be using that engine. So you can get a really efficient, really cost-effective solution, and then you don't have to worry about range anxiety, because should you run out of battery, well, you've got the onboard generator. So I think that idea is awesome. And with government incentives, you can get into this vehicle for a very reasonable price. So overall, I think the package makes a lot of sense. So we used quite a bit of battery going up that hill. We're down to 27 miles of range, and I've only gone 10.2 miles plus a little bit more than that because I reset the odometer a little late, but it isn't looking good for the Volt to hit these 53 miles. One of the cool things I do like about the display is it shows you exactly how much power you're using, how much power you're sending from the battery at any given time, or how much power is going into it. So if you slam on the brakes, you can see a lot of negative power, which is battery power, getting charged, or you can see it a high number up to, the motor is rated for, I believe, around 99 kilowatts. So you'll see that kilowatt rating, if you floor it, shoot up. So now we're braking coming down this hill, and it's reading negative 18 kilowatts there, negative 4 kilowatts when I'm not on the regen button. So it still is charging it just going down this hill, and I'm of course not using any battery power. It's all going back into it as the display shows. You can see the function where it's sending energy back into the battery. We are getting a little bit of fog on the window. I'm going to try and not use climate control as much as possible, just so that I can say that it was as fair of a test as possible, giving it every advantage that it could have. Okay, so from this point forward, it's going to be mostly downhill and, more flat ground. So for the rest of the fuel economy course, there aren't big challenges as far as efficiency is concerned. So we'll see if it starts to do a little bit better. It says we've got 25 miles remaining, and we have a significant amount of the drive remaining. So it doesn't look like it's going to work out, but this part will start to recharge it a bit as we start to go downhill. Now, so far my impressions of the vehicle, I'm actually pretty impressed with it, and I like, there's really not much about it that I don't like. Sitting in the rear seats, you don't really have much headroom back there, and they've added a 5th seat, which seems a bit strange to me because they have cup holders in front of it. So I guess people grab between your legs, or you just rest your feet out here on top of the center console. I'm not exactly sure how that part of it is going to work out. But they added a seat, so maybe another person can fit in it. Not really. But the thing about sitting in the back seats is you don't have a lot of headroom, and the headroom that you do have is that hatch back there. So I find that a bit interesting, because if you were to slam that hatch back and I was sitting back there, it would actually hit me in the head without realizing it. So I could see that accident possibly happening once or twice with some unhappy passengers when you close that down and there's not enough headroom for them, and then you hit them on the head. But aside from that, the rear seats, they have decent leg room. Up front, you've got plenty of headroom and leg room, so no worries about that. But just not super practical in the rear seats. You do have heated seats back there, which is really really nice, and you also do have a heated steering wheel. So it's gone up to 26 miles of range, so we have added a mile so far just from going downhill. So our EV range has shot up to 30 miles now, and it looks like we may be back in the game just because of that big hill. So this is where I usually do my 0 to 60 test. Of course, we're not going to stop today because that would be inefficient. 0 to 60 in this vehicle, I believe that quote is around 8.4 seconds. The 0 to 30 time is much more impressive as you get that torque from the get-go. So I think it was around like 2.6 seconds or something for 0 to 30. So actually really good launch initially, and then it just kind of tapers once you get into the higher speeds. Now, I really do admire what Chevy's done with this vehicle because I think it is a great car, and it's pretty cool that you can drive it pretty much always in electric mode. And, you know, in those rare circumstances where you go on a long trip or whatever, you have that engine to back you up. And for me personally, like, I have huge range anxiety. So when I'm in an electric vehicle, all I can think about is, you know, how many miles do I have left? And with this, you know, you don't have that sense, that anxiety in you because you know, oh, the engine will just pop on and I'll be fine. What does concern me about this vehicle is Chevy's advertising campaign. It seems a bit ridiculous. I was watching this video on YouTube where they have these people get on an elevator and the elevator gets stuck, and then they get to the top of the elevator and they say, you know, hey, like, what was it like getting stuck on an elevator? And then they have the Chevy Volt and the Nissan Leaf, and they talk about how pathetic the Nissan Leaf's range is, only 84 miles, which, by the way, is the lowest trim model. The other trim model gets 107 miles, and Nissan's working on the next generation one, which is going to be over 200 miles. But that's all besides the point. So Chevy says, oh, our car can go over 400 miles, you know, with a fully charged battery and full tank of gas. The Nissan Leaf only gets 84 miles. Which would you rather be in? Like, you don't want to get stuck, and everyone agrees, like, oh yeah, we don't want to get stuck. But it's kind of silly that, you know, Chevy's bashing the Nissan Leaf when that was kind of pioneering that electric car segment, and now Chevy's getting involved in the electric car segment. So with the new Chevy Bolt with a B, not a V, that's going to be confusing for everyone, Bolt versus Volt, because it sounds the exact same. But anyways, 200 miles of electric range that they're trying to go for in the Chevy Bolt, and yet, so are they going to advertise against themselves and say, why buy the Bolt when you can buy the Volt and get an extra 200 miles? Like, so it's kind of silly to, you know, make fun of another technology when you're also investing in that exact same technology. But that said, like, this car is awesome. Like, it deserves praise. I just wish their marketing campaign wasn't to attack the Nissan Leaf, which is a strategy that they're starting to go into the market with. It's just kind of ridiculous. So the update of what's happening, we've gone a little over 25 miles and our EV range remaining is 26 miles. Add that together and you get 51 miles. So if we stay at where we are now, it's looking like it might be possible to finish this in pure electric mode. So we have half the battery remaining and we've gone about half the distance. So far it's looking okay, and I think the rest of this, you know, it's going to be a little bit easier on it. That hill was the hardest part, but we also regenerated a lot of energy coming down it. So we'll see how it does as we continue along. So here we have a little energy display, and it shows us how much of the energy has gone to using different features. So just to kind of prove that this is a best case scenario, this is actually really useful. It's saying 53% of the energy used has gone into driving, and that's the 53% of the battery used. 0% has gone into climate settings, and 0% has gone into other. I'm not playing any music or anything like that. So all of it just purely going into driving this vehicle, and so hopefully, you know, we can hit that 53 mile or a little over 50 mile point without the engine kicking on. do have an ambulance ahead of us. And one of the cool things about Portland, nobody knows how to drive in this city. That's a fact. Everyone drives really slow, and no one knows how to merge onto the highway. They just run in the lane until it ends, and then they're just like, oh, well, I guess I'm in the lane now. And they don't actually merge. They never use a signal. They just drive till the end, and it drives me nuts, and it creates traffic. But one of the cool things about Portland is the amount of respect they have for law enforcement and for ambulances. So when you see a fire truck, an ambulance, a police car with its lights on, pretty much everyone, no matter what they're doing, what lane they're in, what's going on, they pull off and they let that ambulance through. So in scenarios like this, I'm actually surprised that we're not stopping, coming to a halt on the highway because an ambulance just passed. And I'm glad that happens, because honestly, you don't need to. Like, let it get in the left lane, get out of its way, and let it go. But it is really cool how well the Northwest in general reacts to law enforcement. I'm from North Carolina, and there it's just kind of like, oh, like a cop, I'll just get behind him and like go as fast as he's going, and he'll help me get through traffic. And a lot of people don't really take it as seriously as they do out here. So just a small tidbit about the Northwest driving habits. But as I mentioned, nobody knows how to merge here. One of the things that would take some time to get used to is knowing when is the optimal time to hold that paddle shifter, because you only get like one brake setting. It's not like it's a lever that gives you control, so it's either on or off. And so with the regen braking, you kind of have to guess, when do I need to start holding it in order to come to the slowest speed before I get to the stoplight without hitting it too early or too late, where you don't actually regenerate as much energy as you possibly can. So that would be something that would take a little bit of learning. It would be maybe cool to have that where you could alter, you had some resistance in there and you could change the amount of engine braking. But either way, I really like the system. It's kind of fun to use and adds a new element to driving. Especially when it's an electric car and there's no transmission, there's none of that. It's just, go or stop. We're currently reading 20 miles of EV range, and we've gone a little over 36 miles. So add that together, 56 miles of electric range should our EV range continue. Now, at the beginning of the test, it started going downhill pretty quickly. So, we are going to start to turn around where we're going to get into a little bit more uphill, and that will pose a challenge to it. So we'll see how it does. First, we got to get through downtown Portland. As far as the throttle pedal and the brake pedal, the throttle pedal seems a little light at first, so you don't get really strong acceleration. You kind of ease into it, and then if you want more power, you really got to start to put your foot down. The brake pedal is pretty seamless as far as you don't know when it's doing regen or using the disc brakes, and it kind of seamlessly transitions between those or uses them simultaneously. It does feel a little artificial. It doesn't feel, like traditional brakes. It's perhaps just a little stiffer in how it actuates, but it does feel nice. And, for the most part, honestly, you don't need to use that brake pedal except right when you're coming up to a light. I've just been using this left paddle until I get down to about 5 miles an hour, and then I'll tap the brake pedal just to stop. So here we are downtown Portland on Lovejoy, and one of the little tricks with this street is if you go slow enough, around like 15 miles an hour, once one light turns green, you'll never have to touch the brakes. So this is something I always do in my little fuel economy test course. I just kind of drive slow enough so that I don't actually have to use the brakes at all, which is what you're trying to do to drive efficiently. You just never want to use the brakes. Always maintain, conservation of energy. When you stop, you waste all that energy. So you want to just make sure that you're always moving. Of course, you should use the brakes when the light is red, and sometimes when you get into traffic, like you got to drive a little bit slower than I just was, for example, getting distracted because I'm talking. But regardless, it's an efficient way to drive is if you start to learn the lights of your route. This last one not cooperating today, but they're doing some road work, so things change. So starting to get a little rain here, and we're pretty much getting onto our final leg. So we're getting onto Highway 84. We need to get to exit 13, and that's where we will be ending. So I've gone about 40 miles, and it says I have about 18 miles of range left. But, you know, we've got rain. So one of the things I've kind of wondered is how much energy does rain actually take? Because you're taking that little droplet of water and you're accelerating it once it hits your car to whatever speed you're going. So that obviously is some energy, and, you know, you add up all the droplets, it's got to add up to something far more than, you know, like if you were to drive through water, clearly there's way more resistance than driving through air. So I am curious how much that affects it, but I'm sure it's not that big of a deal. Unless you're going really fast, then probably does actually amount to something significant. So we are nearing the end of our journey. It has just crossed over 50 miles on the odometer, and we've actually gone slightly further than that, and it's still reading 6 miles of Idi range. So it's looking like not a problem. It is going to make it for the fuel economy course and make it through all of those miles. The quoted 53 miles of electric range, just as we've seen, is possible. So that's really cool. That Chevy's been able to, you know, they put out a quoted range, and I just exceeded that in the real world under real conditions. It rained. There was some light traffic in areas. I went up a big hill. I came down a big hill. And so, you know, usually the case is I'm able to hit the highway fuel economy numbers of vehicles or a little bit better than that. So I was hopeful that I could do the same in this. But you never know what's going to happen. So it's pretty cool that this battery has indeed allowed for us to go, you know, those 53 miles that they quote without the engine ever coming on. We are down to the last battery, the last little box shown. I can go over to info here. 91% of the battery used for driving, 12.9 kilowatt hours, 0% for climate settings, 0% for others. So obviously if you were using climate settings, you wouldn't have quite the full range there, or playing music, things like that, which you're probably obviously going to be doing. But I just wanted to see if it was indeed possible, and we're actually exceeding what it was saying. So I am pleased with that. 51 miles it's looking like total for the odometer, and still 6 miles of EV range, or let's see, 9% of the battery left over. So well done, Chevy. That's honestly really cool that it did it. I was skeptical at the beginning because it was looking pretty poor, and in fact, in the end, it ended up pulling through and making it to all of those miles. So we've got a little bit left in the box, a little bit of juice left. Let's see if this thing can do a little burnout. Oh yeah, no problem. And it's actually got pretty solid acceleration. It's reading 116 kilowatts going from the battery there once I did floor it. So well done, Chevy. I've been impressed with this vehicle. Thank you all for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those below. And we have the Pabst Blue Ribbon van beside us. Blue Ribbon. Can't speak. Slurring my words. Thinking about PBR. My college drink of choice.